What's up, guys? Welcome into another episode of the Wolverine Live Q&A show. I am your host, EJ Holland. Official visit season is over. Now it's commitment season. Several Michigan targets set to announce their commitment over the next couple of weeks. We can recap official visit season and answer all of your questions. But before we do, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel for free, get notifications every time we drop new videos. And also subscribe to the Wolverine.com today. You want all the intel coming out of Victor's weekend, going into these important official visits. Make sure to head over to the Wolverine.com today. Use the promo code UM1. That's $1 for 2 months over at the Wolverine.com. Get exclusive information on everything Michigan recruiting, the transfer portal, the team as football season approaches, basketball recruiting. Plus, you get to be part of a great message board community with thousands of users. All right, guys. So, like I said, we are going to be answering the questions in the order in which they came. The rule is you can only ask 4 questions. After that, you do need to super chat. If you want to skip the line, then you can leave a super chat. And we already have one from Michelle Wallace, who says, this is just for saying you do a good job on the Wolverines beat. So thank you. Well, we appreciate you, Michelle Wallace, who was also here in the chat early and got the first question in. And it's what's up with Titan Davis, the defensive lineman, edge Carter Meadows, also edge Julian Walker, and offensive lineman Malachi Lee. Well, Titan Davis committed yesterday. If you missed that, we had it up here on our YouTube channel right as it happened. This was obviously a Michigan-Alabama battle, and Lou Esposito, Michigan's defensive line coach, did a fantastic job of coming away with this recruiting win. In terms of Carter Meadows, it's still a tight recruitment. I caught up with Carter and had a story up on him yesterday. I also had an in-depth piece with his father out today. You can find both of those over at the Wolverine.com. And I still think it's, I think Michigan is at worst in the top 2. I think Penn State has kind of faded in this recruitment. I'm not counting out South Carolina, but it seems they're on the outside looking in. This could really turn into a Michigan-Ohio State battle where Michigan has the built-in advantage is education. I know, it's hard to think about education in the NIL world, but obviously it played a big role for 5-star tackle Andrew Babalola, who inked with Michigan last cycle. And I think it plays a legitimate role with Carter Meadows. His parents are more academics than they are true football fans. And I think Michigan did a fantastic job of selling the Meadows family on the Ross School of Business. They had representatives from the Ross School meet with the Meadows family during their OV. I think that really moved the needle. And when you look at Michigan and you look at Ohio State, there's really no comparison when it comes to an academic institution. Michigan is by far the superior school. So on the education side, they have a major leg up on Ohio State. And Michigan also offers development, especially at the edge position. Michigan has a long track record of developing pass rushers. You have a defensive coordinator in Wink Martindale who has coached some of the best pass rushers. And you have Lou Esposito, a guy who has a strong resume of doing more with less. And of course, now that he's at Michigan, he can do more with more. And it would be exciting to see what a guy like Carter Meadows could turn into under the guidance of Esposito. So I'm still very optimistic about Michigan winning over Carter Meadows. In terms of Julian Walker, on 300 edge out of South Carolina, his father is on staff at South Carolina. I still think South Carolina is the team to beat there, but Michigan definitely made a power move this weekend. I would say Michigan is probably running second for Julian Walker. It looks like he's going to take his time, maybe take his recruitment into the fall. So, we'll see how things shake out there. And then Malachi Lee is really an interesting one. And I've been trying to gather information on him all day, and it just doesn't seem like there's enough concrete information for me to really tell you guys I'm leaning this school or I'm leaning this school. It's I think it's turning more into an NIL battle than initially anticipated. I think he likes Texas a lot, and I think Texas is spending big on the offensive line this cycle. But if you're Texas, you're already spending on Felix Ojo. It looks like you want to spend on John Turntine. Are you going to go all in on Malachi Lee? That'll be interesting. The Lee Turntine dynamic is very interesting because I think Texas could land one and Michigan could land one. But yeah, I mean, and I wouldn't count out Alabama or Georgia either. There's still optimism coming out of both of those schools. This is really an open race with a lot of different layers to it going into his decision, which is set for Friday. Michelle Wallace back with another one. She says safety Blake Stewart. I also heard something about a 5-star wide receiver. So Blake Stewart is trending towards Clemson. I would not expect him in the class today. In terms of the 5-star wide receiver, that would be Calvin Russell. And Michigan, I think, established itself as a true contender in the Calvin Russell race. Going into the visit, it was kind of hard to gauge where things really stood with Michigan. But he spent the whole weekend in Ann Arbor along with his agent, who had really positive conversations with Sean McGee. I mentioned earlier in the cycle that Michigan was looking to potentially spend big on an elite wide receiver this cycle. They did some, investigation into guys like Chris Henry Jr. and Tristan Keys, but Calvin Russell has emerged as the, most realistic land, in terms of 5-star level pass catchers. And, you look at the other contenders in his recruitment, he's a Miami legacy, but they're already filling up with wide receivers. It doesn't look like they are all in from an NIL perspective. LSU already has multiple wide receivers committed. It doesn't look like they're fully invested just yet. Michigan, I think, is fully invested, and he would have the opportunity to come in, make an immediate impact as a freshman. Obviously, Michigan's wide receiver room needs help, and you have the opportunity to play with Bryce Underwood in an offense that is set to open things up more under Chip Lindsey. So I think Michigan has become a true dark horse in the Russell recruitment. Paul Geitman says, do you see Dorian Barney in the class? That's a really interesting one. Obviously, our Steve Wiltfong put in a prediction for Michigan to land him, and I would say Michigan does land him when he makes his decision here in a couple of weeks. But the reason I haven't put in a prediction is, my colleague Ethan McDowell deals more with Barney and has a better relationship with him than I do. But also, this recruitment has been so finicky, man. Like, he was considered a Texas A&M lean early on. He never ended up committing there. Then Penn State got a bunch of buzz, and he didn't end up committing there. And now Michigan got the last visit and has plenty of buzz, and he could very well commit. But will he be a guy that stays solid throughout the cycle if he does commit? I kind of just shy away from putting in predictions for recruitments that see such dramatic swings. But I do think Michigan is in a really good spot going into his decision. And I do, again, expect him in the class as of now. Michelle Wallace says there was buzz early about a 5-star quarterback graduates in 26, and then he goes on a mission. So he would actually be a 27 commit. I don't hear anything about him anymore. That would be Ryder Lyons out of Folsom, California. And he actually just committed to BYU. So nothing really to, discuss there. Ryan says Barney's recruitment has been odd. Early on, he was heavily pursued by Bama and Ohio State, but both backed off. Then he nearly committed multiple times to Texas A&M, but didn't. Is it injury history? Is the asking price too high? I think he was probably a guy that was ranked too high early on. Our producer, Megan, can you do me a favor and scroll down a little bit to look at all of his rankings? So on the industry, he's still ranked high at 196. And then you see two services have him in the top 100, and two other services have him as a low 4-star prospect. So that's quite the dramatic difference with Dorian Barney. So again, I think he's probably a guy that was just ranked too high early on. And I think the services and the schools are adjusting as well. I still think he can be a quality player, but he would need some development under Lamar Morgan. But to be completely honest, Barney's a guy that I would have to look at a little bit more and do a little bit more of a deeper film dive since I haven't seen him in person. Ryan says, you do a good job of evaluation. Can you break down Titan Davis? He's got great measurables. I'm surprised he isn't a top 50 player. Is it because he's a tweener or level of competition? I don't think it has anything to do with his level of competition. He plays at one of the best high schools in the St. Louis area. Desmond produces several D1 prospects. You know, they have at least one guy every year for sure. So I don't think it has to do anything with competition. In terms of, you know, is he a tweener guy? Sort of. I would label him more as a versatile guy because he's not a tweener edge defensive lineman. I think he's more of a guy who can just play everywhere across the front. He could stand up if needed, maybe like a Mike Morris type of stand-up guy. But I think he's more suited to play the 4-eye and then potentially play the 3 and maybe even some nose. I just think he's more of a hand in the dirt guy than he is a stand-up guy. Now, so again, I think he can play all of those at Michigan. I think he can be a 4-eye. I think he can be a 3. I think he can play the nose. It really just depends on where his body takes him. So he's a tweener in the sense that we don't know what he's going to project as along the front, and his body could take him in very different ways. Like, this is a guy who could add 40 pounds and play at more than 300 and play some actual nose. This is a guy who could just add, 20 pounds and stay pretty athletic. He already has a really big frame. He has really good length. He, I think, is best suited again for that 4-eye role and could be really an athletic specimen, kind of like a Chris Jenkins. Obviously, Jenkins and Davis, a lot different as high school prospects. Remember, Jenkins was an actual stand-up edge at the high school level and was 235, 240. Jenkins was pretty skinny. He added a ton of weight. With Davis, he's already more filled out than Chris Jenkins, but that's the type of role that I would see him having in Michigan's scheme. But I think it really comes down to, what does he look like as a senior? What does his body look like as a senior? What can we better project him to? But and all the services agree on him. I think they have him all ranked, pretty equally in that 110 to 100. And I don't know. I think the lowest one is like 150. So, they're pretty unanimous on him, and that's where I have him as well. Zachary Pizot says, what are you hearing about Calvin Russell's visit? Did Bryce play a big role this weekend? I think Michigan checked a lot of boxes for him. I think they're going to be ultra aggressive when it comes to NIL. I think that he was impressed with the pitch on the offense and how it's going to open up under Chip Lindsey, and having Bryce at quarterback certainly helps. And I think he knows that there's a real need for him at Michigan. He could go to Miami and be another wide receiver in their class. He could go to LSU and be another wide receiver in their class. He can go to Michigan and potentially start as a true freshman. So I think that that's certainly appealing to him. I think the fact that his agent, who also represents quarterback commit Brady Smigel, is having him, there this weekend to connect with Sean McGee and having that prior working relationship helps Michigan. So like I said, I think Michigan has emerged as a true contender in this race. And yeah, Bryce definitely played a big role. Bryce has been a big selling point for, all the receivers they've gotten on campus. He's also spent a lot of time with Travis Johnson. So, Bryce has been, arguably the face of the team during official visit season. He's like in every photo shoot. Zachary Pizot says, did you see Ojo's tape today? What are your thoughts? Yeah, so Felix Ojo, 5-star offensive lineman from Texas. Michigan's still in the top group, but probably trending away. I think he ends up at Texas. Ohio State seems to be the biggest threat to Texas. In terms of his tape today, yeah, so he was performing at the Rivals Challenge, and I saw he had a rough go of it. But I think, a lot of June, right, especially for offense, I don't put too much stock into it or really into most of the Rivals Challenge, because when you look at June, right, these guys are on official visits every weekend. And then Ojo especially did like a worldwide tour where I think he made some midweek visits too. How often are they training? He might have just gotten a little bit out of shape. Their minds focused somewhere else. Their body's probably just exhausted from traveling and having to come home and do some workouts. But again, I don't know how much he's actually training, so I don't put a whole lot of stock into it. I've seen Ojo live on a couple of occasions, and I think he's a 5-star level guy. Zachary Pizzo says, any buzz from Savion's Tennessee visit this weekend that should be worrying? No, nothing that should be worrying. I think this is a really close battle, and him and his family are going to take some time to talk about it and make a decision later this summer. And they've been very calculated throughout the process. So it's just going to take some time for Savion Hyder to come to, an ultimate conclusion. Zachary Pizzo. Oh, we have a super chat from FaZe Fortnite who says, what's going on with CJ Sadler? So CJ Sadler on 300 wide receiver out of Cass Tech in Detroit. Seemed like a guy who was going to jump in Michigan's class early on. Obviously, that didn't happen. We get questions about CJ Sadler, but, it's kind of a sensitive topic. I would just say there's been moving parts in this recruitment, and I just don't see him ending up at Michigan right now. Obviously, he didn't take an official visit to Michigan this summer, which, if you don't take an OV, probably not going to end up in the class. So we'll see if things change with Sadler later in the cycle. But, as of right now, it doesn't really seem like Sadler's that high on the priority board. Zachary Pizzo says, what are you hearing about turn time? Texas a heavy favorite, or is it tighter than it looks? It's definitely tighter than it looks. I thought Michigan did a fantastic job on his OV, but Texas regained some momentum this past weekend. And then on top of that, Texas A&M has become more of a contender than initially thought. So it's a really heavily competitive, tight 3-team race that could go in a lot of different directions. I think NIL will be a piece, but I think Turntine is genuinely struggling with the decision as well. Ben Rickett says, how do you think Michigan will finish off the defensive line class? They might just take, in terms of true hand in the dirt guys, they might just take these two. They'll probably still work on Damari Simeon, who's expected to make his decision here in a few days, but I don't see him really ending up at Michigan. They'll keep working on Deuce Gerald's, but I don't see him ending up at Michigan. Ben Boulware is still a possibility, but it really depends on whether or not Michigan pushes. You already have Titan Davis committed. You have Alistair Vallejo committed. And then Mikhail Blade, Michigan recruited him as an edge, but they also told him, hey, be open-minded to potentially playing with your hand in the dirt as well. So another defensive line take is possible, but I'm not sure if they do take one. Now, at edge, they would love to obviously have Carter Meadows, and they're going to continue to work on Julian Walker. I don't think Jackson Ford ends up in the class right now. So, I think right now the big priority is obviously getting Meadows at edge. Ben Rickett says, since Deck committed to Baylor today, who do you think they will prioritize at safety? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Michigan needs a true tall, long safety. The big two candidates here were Chase Calicut and Jordan Deck. Obviously, Jordan Deck committing to Baylor. Chase Calicut set to make his decision on Friday, and it doesn't look great for Michigan. So, the Wolverines might have to make some fall evaluations or continue to try to work on flipping those guys. Ben Rickett says, from a 27 standpoint, who do you think will be the first commit? Well, there's plenty of in-state targets, and I think you have to work your way inside out this coming cycle. I think it's kind of one of those rare years like 2021 where you just have such an immense amount of talent in the state of Michigan. So I think you could see, maybe a guy like Chad Willis or Daryl Flemister or one of those more underrated guys. Trey Britton, one of the more underrated in-state prospects. Go ahead and try to lock up their spot early on. Ben Ricketts says, I need flip targets. Well, they're still working to flip Markel Dabney from SMU. That seemed like a done deal this weekend. He's continued to delay his decision. We've gotten no update on an exact day or time, but he remains a flip target. Caden Catchings was on campus this weekend. He's another under-the-radar linebacker committed to Liberty. They could, try to flip him. I think they'll continue to work on Kari Adams, top 100 corner who just committed to Notre Dame. I think they'll continue to work on Jordan Deck. And I think you'll see more flip targets emerge as the cycle goes. Paul Geitman says, has the CJ Sadler ship sailed? Right now I don't see Sadler in the class. Customer service says, are there any more Jonathan Brown recruitments that are under wraps? Not right now, not one like that. I think that one was kind of just an interesting situation. Customer service says, what are our chances using a high-low scale with Calvin Russell and the other visitors from this past weekend? Is there any news with Samson Gash? Didn't Alabama extend him an offer? Yeah, with Gash, he actually just committed to Michigan State. Michigan never really pushed there. They didn't offer. In terms of high-low scale for Calvin Russell, I think that probably medium to high, in that range. I think Michigan, again, established itself as a true contender in that recruitment. Paul Geitman says, would Michigan still take Robinson if they managed to land Russell? And that's an interesting question. Right now, Michigan is planning for 3 commitments at wide receiver. So you already have Jalen Pyle committed. They're trending in the right direction for Travis Johnson. Calvin Russell is set to make a decision a day after Travis Johnson. Zion Robinson doesn't have a commit date set. I still think Zion Robinson ends up in Michigan's class, but the numbers are tight at wide receiver. Would they make room? I'm not sure. I think they should. I think you should take all 3 of those guys. Zion Robinson has tremendous upside. Calvin Russell is obviously, ranked as a 5-star. Travis Johnson has been a top target for a long time. I just think you make room for any of that mixture of guys and just take 4. Tom H says, for right job right now, I am really struggling. At my company, I'm responsible for linebacker recruiting. Should I go on to franchising? Do you know of anybody I should talk to? That's a great question, Tom. We actually have a great sponsor here, Andy Luedecke. Are you a displaced corporate executive or wanting to put your career into your own hands, or are you an experienced entrepreneur wanting to diversify? Andy Luedecke can help. Andy is a huge college sports fan and franchise veteran, having owned multiple franchises and businesses. Using his expertise, he helps others find their American dream through a very thorough consultation and evaluation process. Call Andy, put your life and career in your own hands. Best of all, his services are 100% free to you. So what do you have to lose? Call Andy today at 404-973-9901 or email him at andy@myperfectfranchise.net. I'm not sure how much Andy can help with linebacker recruiting unless he gives one of the big linebacker targets McDonald's or something, but he can definitely help you own a great franchise. Okay, let's go with Jack. And he says, how many wide receivers are we looking to land? I know we have 3 big bodies in Russell, Robinson, and Johnson on the board, and Jalen Pyle committed. So are they looking to take 4 with 2 big bodies and 1 more slot? I kind of touched on that here in this last question. They are looking to take 3 wide receivers, but I think, if Johnson, Robinson, and Russell all want in, I think you make room and you take 4. Obviously you took Jalen Pyle early. It is what it is, but I think these guys, you have to make room for them, in my opinion. Jack says, I thought Deck set a commitment date in July. Yeah, he did. It was July 5th, but, Baylor won him over this weekend. Gary Gaines says, Notre Dame went on 3, was bragging about an upcoming commit that they were going to beat us out for. Who were they referring to? I can't remember. I believe that would have been top 100 cornerback Kari Adams, but like I said, Michigan will continue to recruit him. Jack says, what's happening with linebacker recruiting? We seem to have faded with Abrams, Rouse, and Goodwin. Yeah, Rouse was always going to be a tough land. I think he's still heavily favored to Tennessee. Goodwin, I wouldn't say Michigan has faded. It really just depends on if Michigan pushes or not. I think they could have landed a commitment from Goodwin on his official visit, but they wanted to stay patient with linebacker recruiting. But I think time is ticking there. And then Abrams is the most surprising one. I thought Michigan was probably in the top 2 coming out of his official visit, and now it seems like they're running 4th. So they have a lot of work to do with Abrams. I think, a stronger NIL package could definitely help there. So I wouldn't count Abrams out yet. But again, I think, Sean McGee is going to have to play a big role in that one. Scoot517 says, what safeties do we end up with? Chase Calicut and Donovan Webb. I think Calicut is going to be a tough land. He commits on Friday, and, I don't see it being Michigan right now. Donovan Webb, I have a prediction in for Michigan, and I do think he lands in the class, but Michigan's recruiting him as more of a nickel. They're still working on Salisi Moa, but also more of a nickel. So, Donovan Webb, Salisi Moa, those guys aren't those, true safeties that Michigan was looking for with Deck and Calicut. So I don't know where they really go, if Calicut commits elsewhere on Friday. Butter XO says, where does Michigan sit with its top offensive line targets, and how many will Michigan take? Right now, I would say Michigan probably takes 4. I think with John Turntine, it could go any of those ways. Texas A&M, Michigan. It's really a close race. Zayden Krempin, Michigan, Texas A&M. I think that one's kind of a toss-up. We'll see if distance plays a factor. Malachi Lee, really tough recruitment to read. Like I said earlier, you have Alabama, you have Georgia, but I think Texas and Michigan are kind of, at the top, but that one's become more NIL heavy than expected. So it could go any of those ways. I think that Michigan leads for Marky Walbridge, but Boston College has become more of a factor. And you may laugh at Boston College, and you saw me smirking there, but I was smirking not because Boston College is lame. I mean, it kind of is, but because Marky is a Boston area native, and because Drew Kendall, man, remember? I mean, Drew Kendall was supposed to commit to Michigan, and he kept delaying, and he finally ended up at Boston College. So, it's something we've seen before. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see which of those guys they really land. I think they're still in it with Kelvin Obot, who visited over the weekend, but, still some work to do there. I think Utah leads. Felix Ojo has kind of faded, so we'll see. It'll be up to Moore to really personally close with some of these offensive linemen. Shout out to Orlando Vallejo, who says Texas is so hot. Yeah, man, I can't wait to get back down there in the heat to finally get a chance to see Alistair Vallejo, his son, who's obviously committed to Michigan. Alistair is a 3-star for us right now, but I don't think he'll be a 3-star for much longer. And I'm really excited to get some updated film of him and get an in-person evaluation. Alistair's probably the guy I'm most looking forward to seeing here in the near future. I obviously want to go down there in the summer and watch him work out, but really excited to see him play in a game. And you see he's already rising up the rankings, a 4-star on the industry ranking. Like I said, a 3-star for us, but I expect that to change here in the near future. Let's go down to Jordan Batka says, EJ, you're even smarter than me. I don't even know what that means. Luke Hennege says, is there anything with Deuce Gerald's? Would we make room for him in the class considering what we have and Blade potentially a swing guy? Yeah, so our other reporter, Ethan McDowell, has been really into the Deuce Gerald's recruitment. He has a personal relationship with Deuce. And as of today, they are still pushing for Deuce Gerald. So I mentioned that Michigan already has Vallejo committed. They obviously landed Titan Davis. Mikael Blade can end up, being more of a hand in the dirt type of guy. And that could be it. But if a guy like Gerald wants to come in, I do think they would take him, but I still think there's work to do there. Customer service says, I am not happy with my job and would like to start a Chick-fil-A or another chicken franchise in Virginia, but no, I don't know how to start. Do you have any leads on where I could start? Like I said earlier, we already had this, man. Andy at myperfectfranchise.net is your guy for Chick-fil-A's. I mean, my guy, Orlando, would know. HEB's down in Texas, Buc-ee's. Buc-ee's is actually making its way from Texas to Virginia. They're opening their first Virginia location. So you can invest in Buc-ee's today. Anyway, hit up Andy Luedecke at andy@myperfectfranchise.net. All right, guys, we've hit the half-hour mark. Let's go a little bit more rapid fire here. Butter XO says, can they land Calvin Russell, Zion? I think he meant Zion Robinson and Travis Johnson. Yes, I do think that's possible. I think it is likely they get 2 out of the 3. TP Money 44 says, how many 5-star recruits are a real possibility of landing? Savion Hyder, Carter Meadows, Calvin Russell. Those would be the big 3 in my opinion. Customer service says, is there any news on Brady Marchese? It looks like he's sticking with Georgia. Mr. Ortho says, would they make room for Deuce Gerald's? Is that the spot Boulware is waiting on? Yes, they would make room for Deuce Gerald's. And like I said earlier, it's kind of a wait and see with Ben Boulware. But I could still see him in the class, just, a lot to sort out there. Wolverine Casual says, feels like your confidence in Hyder has faded from a Michigan lean to a coin flip. What signs make you think that, or am I wrong? If you forced me to make a prediction today, I'd probably go with Michigan, but I think I'm just taking more of a cautious approach because the Hyder family is waiting it out. There could be a lot that changes with business discussions and things of that nature. Savion's also just going to take his time, continue to talk to the staffs, continue to think about things. So it could go either way. Gary Gaines says, do we have a legit punter, not a glamorous position, but can be a huge weapon? Is the punter we got in the transfer portal going to perform well enough? I don't think they're looking to take a high school punter. They've already taken a long snapper and a kicker. Maybe next cycle. We've obviously seen Michigan put a premium on specialists. So I think that's a possibility, just maybe not, this cycle. Wolverine Casual says, did the national guys take your evaluations into account when making changes since they can't see everything? I do communicate with Charles Power and try to send them as many things as I can from my time on the road. Wolverine Casual says, what kind of receivers are Russell, Johnson, and Robinson? How do they compare? Russell is a big, tall athlete. I think everybody, even in those pictures from Michigan, you could see the size. He's legitimately listed at 6'5.5". I can't find any verified track times, but he's a high-level athlete who also doubles as a Division I basketball player. And I think Travis Johnson is a little similar. He's a big body, also doesn't have the verified track times, but he is 6'3", 180, a little shorter than Calvin Russell. But I would say Travis is a better pure wide receiver right now. I've always said the thing that is really that I really admire about Travis's game is just the silky smooth route running, getting in and out of breaks, being able to sink your hips at that size. Travis checks a lot of boxes. I think is more polished than Calvin Russell, but Calvin's just such a massive target with so much upside. And then Zion is really interesting. He's kind of rail thin, man. He really needs to add some weight, but he can run. He has verified track times. He ran in the 10.8s, 10.9s as an underclassman. He can go straight line, but I think he's a guy who you just send vertical right now because he does have a lot of polishing up to do as a pure wide receiver, but he is coming along. He's actually getting in work with former NFL wide receiver Michael Crabtree this offseason. Mr. Ortho 12 says, is the Savion hype dying or just quiet? Just quiet. That's all. It's going to take a little bit of time for him to make a decision. And Savion doesn't talk much, as you guys already know. All right, guys, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel for free, get notifications every time we drop new videos. Also, make sure to subscribe to the Wolverine.com. Use the promo code UM1. That's $1 for 2 months over at the Wolverine.com. We will be back with another episode next week. So join us next Tuesday.